just ask a simple starter question. How are you this morning? If you are like many other people, you are experiencing days of pain, physical, emotional, relational. Many these days are feeling weary of COVID and conventions. Many are anxious about school and college and work. Many are struggling with inner turmoil and conflict and confusion, tough decisions to make. It's a tough time to be a working parent. I just happened to look at a website called scarymommy.com. And at the bottom of the page was a section for parents to write in their confessions. And these moms wrote in things like, "My loneliness is killing me. I can hardly keep from crying. I don't want to play with my kids. I don't feel like playing." And one wrote, "I hate everyone right now." These are tough times. These are very difficult times. You're not alone. We're all going through tough times together. When we're going through tough times, it's a good time to spend some time with restful Jesus, calm and serene Jesus, peaceful Jesus, good shepherd Jesus. I like that Jesus, but I'm sorry. That's not the Jesus we're invited to spend time with today. Instead, the reading that is assigned for us today is challenging Jesus, urgent Jesus, high expectation Jesus, who calls us in our tiredness to step up and do even more. The text for this morning comes from the Gospel of Matthew, the 16th chapter. And if you remember the reading from a little earlier in the service, you might remember that it comes right after last week's reading. Last week, Peter was and the other disciples were with Jesus at Caesarea Philippi. About halfway through Jesus' ministry, or late in Jesus' ministry, and he says, "Who do you say I am?" And Peter, his hand is like up first thing, and he says, I know, you're the Messiah." That's Peter, teacher's pet, star of the class, annoying. He gets it right. Jesus says, "Yeah, Peter, that's it. You got it. I am the Messiah." Well, that was where it ended. Now it picks up today with Jesus saying to Peter and the disciples, "All right, I want you to know the plan that's coming up. I want you to be aware of what's going to happen next. Here's the plan. You ready? We're going to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to stir up a lot of trouble. I'm going to break some laws. I'm going to disturb the order. I'm going to get people upset. I'm going to get arrested by the police. I'm going to get beaten up by the police. I'm going to get executed by the police under the authority of the political leaders of the day." That's the plan. First time they've ever heard it. Peter, star of the class, says, "Jesus, you got it all wrong. That's not the plan. The plan is we're going to stay up here where we are, and we're going to have a good time together. We're going to be real popular." Jesus looks straight into the eyes of the star pupil and says, "Get behind me, Satan. Get behind me. Get in line. If you want to be a part of my movement, you need to be behind me and follow me and walk with me." Jesus says, if you want to be a part of this movement, I'm going to give you the job description. You too will stir up trouble. You too will break some laws. You too will disturb the order. And you might get arrested, you might get beaten, and you might get killed. All of that Jesus summarizes with the phrase, you will carry a cross. Might not be literal, but figuratively, Jesus says, all my followers are going to carry a cross. Now, we want to just be clear what that means. To carry a cross, in my understanding, means three things. We're going to be called to do something really hard. We're going to choose to do it. It's not forced upon us. It's choosing to do something, and it's for someone else. That's what Jesus means when he says, you're going to carry a cross. My followers will carry a cross. Voluntarily choose something very difficult, not for themselves, but for someone else. In saying these things, Jesus is saying to you and me, you know what? I have really high expectations of you. I have high expectations of all my followers. Now, I want to try to sort this out very carefully. Sometimes we think Jesus doesn't ask anything of us, only believe. Sometimes we think because we're such losers or failures, we don't do anything, Jesus does everything. Sometimes we think Jesus set the bar so high that we would automatically fail and we would know how much we needed him. That's not how I understand Jesus. I think Jesus has extremely high expectations of you and me. He doesn't lower the bar, he raises it. I have to be honest, I love this notion of a high expectation Jesus. I want to follow someone who challenges me or stretches me or looks at me and says, I have important work for you to do. And that's what I think Jesus is doing here. Peter had this understanding of discipleship that Jesus needed to correct. Peter thought all Jesus wants us to do is believe in him, not actually follow him. But they're not the same thing. And today we can look around and see many cases of folks who believe in Jesus, but they don't seem to be following him. There's a gap. Lots of folks believe in Jesus, but they don't stand for what he stands for. They don't do the kinds of things he did. They don't care for the kinds of people that Jesus cared for. The world we live in today, believe it or not, there are some people who claim to be followers of Jesus. They'll even hold up a Bible for everyone to see. They'll even say the word God a lot of times, and yet don't seem to follow him at all. Jesus calls us to do more than hold up a Bible and say God. Jesus calls us to follow him. Nobody understood this better, I think, than a Lutheran pastor, theologian, and eventually martyr named Dietrich Bonheffer. Bonheffer lived in Germany in the 1930s, the rise of the Nazi Party. He looked around, he saw how many people attended church, believed in Jesus, but followed the Third Reich. He looked around and he saw many people who said, Jesus is Lord, and yet pledged their allegiance to the flag. Bonheffer looked around and he saw people who said, we follow this Jew from Nazareth, while supporting the extermination of Jews from Europe. In response to this gap, this misunderstanding of discipleship, he wrote a book that is translated as The Cost of Discipleship. It's a powerful book. It challenges and stretches me anytime I look at it. Bonheffer makes a distinction between two kinds of grace. Peter's version, which Bonheffer calls cheap grace. There's no discipleship, no cost, no sacrifice, no carrying a cross. That's what Peter was looking for, cheap grace. Contrast it with what Jesus calls us to live out, which is a costly grace. Costly because it costs us everything. And it means that we always are asking, well, what does Jesus call me to do today? We don't earn that grace, but it's a grace that calls us to give all that is within us. Today, Jesus calls us still to a costly grace, a deep commitment. Let me give a story. Kenosha, Wisconsin. It's a painful story. Carol Badoni, 50-year-old woman from Burlington, made the trip to Kenosha last Tuesday to protest another police shooting of an unarmed black man. And joining in protests Tuesday night, her and others in the crowd were approached by a white supremacist with a high-powered semi-automatic rifle. This guy shot into the crowd. Shot one person, shot a second person, shot a third person. Carol Badoni saw one of those victims go down while the shooter was still nearby. Ran up to him, started performing CPR. She said he wasn't breathing. And then she went on and said, I never run toward trouble, but it's worth getting shot for somebody else. That's a costly grace. That's a serious discipleship. The story from Kenosha is not about looting and rioting, as some politicians and newscasts would like you to believe. Those are the symptoms of a deeper problem. The story from Kenosha is about systemic racism, police brutality, and about people like Carol carrying a cross for others. Jesus calls us to eliminate any gap between our words and our actions, our believing and our following, our honoring of his cross, and carrying our own cross for others. We all have to figure out what that means for us. There's no easy answers. Your cross is probably different from mine, and mine is probably different from someone else's. Jesus challenges us with these high expectations and invites us to figure out what's the cross I'm called to carry today for someone else.